Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we are going to be looking at, well, this is kind of an interesting one. We're going to be looking at a bunch of therapy session notes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I know it sounds maybe a little bit voyeuristic,
Yeah, a little bit.
but I promise you it's not like that.
No.
What we are really interested in
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
what are some of the patterns we can find in how people are struggling and maybe how they're overcoming those struggles.
I think that's really where the gold is.
Right. Right, because these are these notes kind of give us a little snapshot into what's happening in a therapy session. They're not a transcript or anything; they're more like the key takeaways.
Like the biggest concerns. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so as I was going through these, one thing that really stood out to me was just how much family comes up.
Yeah, family of origin
Wow.
over and over again.
Right, family of origin.
It's so central to so many of the things that we end up dealing with.
I even wrote down a quote from one of the clients.
Oh yeah.
Who said, "I've learned a lot from my family about what not to do."
Oh, that's great.
I mean, it's kind of funny, but
I love that. Yeah.
but it's also incredibly insightful, right?
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, right? Like
Uh-huh.
what were those things and how did that impact the way they see the world and the way they interact in their relationships?
Right, and it makes you think about your own family too.
Absolutely.
Like what are some of the things?
How has that impacted? You've learned. Yeah, the way you approach things.
What not to do?
Yeah.
One thing I found fascinating was I don't know if there's a better way to say this, but like the way family dynamics kind of play out in predictable ways.
Oh, yeah, yeah. You see these patterns.
Yeah.
One thing that comes up a lot in the literature is like people who grow up in families where there's a lot of conflict avoidance. They
Mhm.
often struggle with being assertive
Oh, interesting.
later in life, right?
Okay.
Like they learn
They're
that
trying to keep the peace.
keep the peace and not rock the boat, and then it shows up in their workplace. Or
Oh, that's a powerful observation. It's not just that family matters, but like certain
specific dynamics.
play out lead
Oh.
to yeah.
Yeah.
So another theme that we see popping up all over the place is stress.
Oh, stress. Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is not just that people are stressed. I mean, we're all stressed,
We live in a stressful world.
but it's how interconnected the stress is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just that people are stressed about one thing. It's that work stress bleeds into their relationships.
Yeah.
Their relationship stress bleeds
The
into
health.
yeah, or like if they're having health challenges, that creates a whole other layer of stress.
Yeah. There's one client who describes feeling frustrated with my problem running. And it's interesting. They talk about how that affects their anxiety, their eating habits.
It's all connected.
It's like a domino effect.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to, our sort of innate stress response, right? Like we have this fight or flight response that's wired into us.
Yeah.
And so when we're stressed, our bodies are reacting, right? And sometimes those reactions aren't necessarily
Helpful.
the most helpful in the long run, right?
Right. So it's not just in your head, it's your whole
the physiological room.
body.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of, we've got all this family stuff, we've got the stress, but what about the ways people are trying to cope with this, to deal with this? What did you see in the notes?
Well, I mean, one thing that really struck me is this deep desire for connection and this struggle to build healthy coping mechanisms. I mean, you see a lot of clients, even later in life, who are still sort of searching for that sense of secure attachment.
Right.
It really highlights that fundamental human need to feel safe, to feel connected, to have those reliable bonds.
And it's not just, romantic relationships or anything.
Yeah, no.
There are people here who are, trying to rebuild trust with family members, with friends.
Yeah.
Navigating the dating world.
Sure.
And even making decisions like, I'm not going to drink alcohol on dates anymore.
Yeah.
Because they realize how it's affecting their interactions.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting too how sometimes those coping mechanisms can be kind of a double-edged sword, right?
Right.
Like on the one hand, you're trying to protect yourself,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, it might be preventing you from getting the support that you need.
There's one client who talks about how they're not telling their mother everything that's going on because
Yeah.
they don't want to,
Burden her.
well, yeah, burden her, but also affect her relationship with the client's children.
Right.
So it's like this really complicated calculation of like, how do I
protect
protect everyone?
Yeah.
And yet still get my